everything you're seeing on the screen right now will be released to Star Citizen in a single patch. 4.0, 4.0, 4.0, 4.0, 4.0, 4.0. I've been covering Star Citizen 4.0 for a long time, like unhealthily so. The best part about this update is the fact that we no longer have to look forward to 4.0, but the idea of this patch has changed quite a bit throughout the years, from its initial introduction in 2017 to the release candidate we've been tracking throughout the year, to now. From the new star system to the new star cows, we've got several new features and locations and maybe even a few bugs to cover today. And despite much disappointment surrounding late delays to the update, losing features we'll likely see early on next year, the key element from all those years ago has persisted throughout the years, going from concept to prototype to now, as many have experienced over the past weeks, reality, server meshing. So it's a bit of a monumental moment. Of course, 3.24.3 is still running on the live servers as well, a first for CIG in order to allow players the choice of the possibly less stable 4.0 with the unfinished mission system, or something they are more familiar with in the 324 branch. It's appreciated for the holiday break, and everything you do in 4.0 will still persist after the progress wipe, and this full progress wipe might actually be one of the last we ever see. This video isn't going to be a review of 4.0, more a look at the major additions with some opinions littered throughout. For more of my full opinions on the update, subscribe here and check back in about a month. And thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. We've gotta start today's tour looking at the planets of Pyro. Star Citizen's planets continue to impress. While not the most important assets on their own, these are a backdrop of the large chunk of the rest of the game. Across my time playing on these 6 planets and 5 moons, I've seen some things.
I'm gonna mess you up.
There's a very calm beauty to Pyro that becomes very apparent when you get away from the more populated centers. A distinct sense of loneliness, especially when you don't know how far the next rest stop is. Between the new planets, I would say my favorites are Pyro 4 and Pyro 3, Bloom. Pyro 4 is the first planet with rings, and it's actually in a degrading orbit around its nearby elder Pyro 5, along with Pyro 5's 5 moons, which of course come with their own ground locations. With each planet, you're actually missing out on some planetary diversity I think we should probably be seeing by now. Things like radiation or toxicity in the air. And just the general safety you still feel in this system might be exacerbated by the fact that those solar flares that were supposed to be here are missing, but regardless, naturally it doesn't really feel all that dangerous in this system. You'll find large planetary structures, sure, the deep gash across Pyro 5's 3rd moon, or the gigantic crater in Pyro 4, the mark left over by whatever collided with it and sent it towards Pyro 5. But the actual act of visiting a planet doesn't really feel too different just yet, outside of the music, the clouds, and the colors. There are also, of course, the new cave types being updated from the older, less friendly types of caves, so that we now have rocky, acidic, and sand type caves all in the new format. Hopefully, we'll start to see more missions put down there as well. These are going to be in both the Pyro and Stanton system. And aside from caves, we know the planets aren't completely empty. They do introduce new outposts as well. Outposts we've watched in development since 2020. Outposts that bring with them new factions, new missions, and new gameplay options. I've had mostly good times at these new locations. They are spread quite wide, offer a wide variety of indoor and outdoor spaces, and feel much more breathable and explorable than other locations where we've experienced social and combative gameplay. In fact, these are both some of the first places I've fought AI outdoors, and the first time I think I've ever really heard NPCs going about their days and speaking to each other.
Yeah, I feel that.
We will talk about stability in a bit, but the added amount I saw did make a difference with these locations, making them nicer to visit. And they work pretty distinct, though you will start to notice some similar looking areas rather quickly. Hopefully something they can continue to work on by adding more assets to their library. But these outposts, their surroundings, their backdrops, their designs, the people I saw, all presented pretty well during the calm periods and during combat. NPCs were doing things correctly based on their faction, cowering in fear and fighting against the people who were attacking. And as you move through these locations, they felt like full-on settlements and towns that, combined with the planets around them, the soundtracks, and the atmosphere, really sold the sense of a different space from one another. A location that actually might be thriving when they could get more NPCs out here, and a spot that you could spend a lot more time than any outpost we've had before. The locations have layers to them. You'll come across 2-story buildings with roof installations that you'll need to climb up to defeat enemies on top of, elevators that descend down underground into a mechanics room, crawl spaces that allow you to sneak in and around the locations, and multiple paths across settlements of different sizes. There are also plenty of remote sites just a short drive from these locations. These smaller satellite locations host their own NPCs, missions, and infrastructure as well. They are locations that will be referred to as the same name as their main outpost hub that they're near, but they are their own complete standalone location. So with all this stuff going on, the amount of ground activity in Pyro is far outpacing what we see in Stanton. I've really only had the time to explore a couple of these new planets, so for those looking to find new locations, you're gonna have plenty to do in 4.0 in Pyro. But now the question starts to pop up in people's heads: how long until Stanton starts to get updated to match? Space-based locations are sufficiently one-upping Stanton as well, with the inclusion of larger space stations, of which I've seen 3 so far, along with more broken down rest stop types, of which I think there are several more, asteroid clusters littered throughout the system, and asteroid facilities. These asteroid facilities are a pretty cool idea. They're essentially like packaged locations that can be visited for exploration, loot, combat, or just to claim some space for yourself and some friends. They all do share the same exterior though, and the interiors are not hugely expansive. They offer more than a bunker in 3.24 wood on the surface of Hurston, and they tie into other locations' missions, meaning these are chained in and you'll have to visit them for other tasks. But on their own, these wouldn't be enough to keep you really entertained, in my opinion. The other space stations are service stops that will provide you with what you need if you fit the reputation requirement, but we'll talk more about that later. Finally, the large space stations of Checkmate, Obituary, and Ruin Station are your main stop-off points, owned and operated by gangs, and your spawn points in the current Pyro system. While these are currently safe zones, I'm not entirely sure of what CIG's plan is for these going forward anymore, but at some point I believe they're supposed to be weapons free. That is, of course, with the gangs enforcing their own security. But for now, these are all fairly similar space stations with many of the same additions that the new ground locations offer: crawl spaces, extra platforming opportunities, and back alleys to explore. Just put on top of a dirty version of the space stations we mostly already know. I'll be honest, after the initial showcase of what they wanted to do with these stations a couple of years ago, I was hoping these would be a bit more expansive in their exploration opportunities. There's also a pretty large amount of repetition amongst these stations, combined with the removal of Ruin Station as a proper landing zone as it was supposed to be. This disappoints me a bit, as I was looking forward to a more significant evolution on space stations than what we've seen in Pyro. Maybe we'll discover more pretty quickly after this patch has been able to stew for a bit. And of course they're going to add on to these stations in the future, but at least for this first iteration, I was thinking we would see a bit more than this. These stations are probably the least impressive part of the locations in this update for me. With the game very much still split into armistice zones and non-armistice zones, these systems are dominated by demarcated contested zones. These zones are fun, awarding exploration, combat, stealth, and efficient looting, but they feel like a little bit of a consolation instead of getting some larger, more expansive, open-ended space stations in a sandbox environment in Pyro, though I think that's still a plan at some point in the future when the gangs can start to fend for themselves and take care of problem people. For now, let's talk about the contested zones and missions. Contested zones are something you can go all the way back to Todd Pappy talking about in 2020.
Then we obviously have like abandoned space stations and Jump Town, and we have certain hotspots, within the system that I still think they're 100% valid, and that people should be able to go there and try that out.
It serves a double purpose. It attracts the people looking for it to those places, and it lets the people who want to avoid it avoid those places.
Yeah.
This idea that hotspots would exist in Star Citizen to attract players to more dangerous play has remained true this whole time. While global events are that to some extent, you also have locations like Jumptown, Ghost Hollow, and Korea Security Station. These contested zones are just another version of this, within a star system that, make no mistake, is being developed as the later game territory for Star Citizen as opposed to Stanton, Terra, or Castra. There will be these even more concentrated areas of almost guaranteed conflict and territory. That's just the nature of this type of star system. And they work pretty well. My time inside of them has been a mixture of tense exploration, constant doubling back on myself and getting lost, and fighting with NPCs and players alike, probably 90% to 10% respectively. It's been a completely different experience than what the rest of Star Citizen offers, but it is still very combat focused, which Star Citizen has proven they want to deliver. What I was hoping to see with these locations is also some more calm and methodical gameplay in exploration and investigation. I have yet to see that, but maybe I haven't explored enough. I'll get back to you on that as well later next month. And while the missions have been fun, I can even introduce you to a mission chain that takes you across the system to different locations. These still do feel a bit repetitive fairly quickly. Since they are not affected by reputation, I'm not sure how these could scale to get more interesting for regular players. While certain locations might read your reputation and launch more deterrence against you, every player seems like they're going to get the same experience if they go into these zones, whether they've done it one time or 100. But at least for early on, as long as the game is running well, these are going to be a pretty good time. And they offer some unique loot that you can't get anywhere else in the game. Now, that's not to say you can't get these some other way. Even in my own org, we're starting to trade items and put in buy orders. But the fact that we're starting to see things offered as rewards through gameplay rather than through store play is pretty good for the game. I hope we still see a focus on the sandbox environment in the general areas of the space stations and the reputation system's effect on it. But for now, it seems much of the more gameplay-focused portion of these new space stations has been put in a specific zone you'll have to enter yourself. Missions in 4.0 overall are going to take you to a wider variety of locations than what we've seen in Stanton. Asteroid facilities, space stations, caves, outposts, other types of outposts, derelict buildings, asteroid clusters. There are a lot of different places to find things to do here, but one of the more painful parts of Star Citizen is that you can't really get good mission content consistently, and while the missions in Pyro don't solve that problem, they make a good step in doing so. Even in just the beginning stages of play, you'll find a host of cargo, mercenary, and salvage missions available to you, paying decent amounts. Where a merc mission in Stanton might net you 20 to 30, I've seen as much as 80,000 offered in Pyro, though my numbers for Stanton might be a bit outdated. There are also just more missions popping up. While many pop up on your Mobiglass, local missions are now a thing that you can get whenever you're going to a new location, which will obviously expand to allow players to run a bunch of fetch quests, local tasks, and other types of small missions at a location for as long as they want in the future. With the stability I've seen, you'll be able to actually run these missions quite well. And given every mission in the game has now gone through a mission refactor to work on this new system, hopefully we'll see them work more here and in Stanton. But don't expect this to give you a rush like a polished and finished game. There's still plenty of jank. It's just better. And as long as it's running well, I actually do have some good fun. I have a lot more to look through when it comes to the missions, but it seems at least in Pyro there are a lot more to take part in, and the collection of repair-based missions now found in the maintenance category is still kind of unclear at this point, at least as of the time of this writing. As a last-minute addition, this is something I'll have to get more info about over the next couple of weeks. I'll probably also have to return to Stanton at some point to see what's been going on over there. And of course, as is the reason for the update running parallel to the previous one, some missions will simply not exist in 4.0 just yet. Hopefully that can get figured out within the scope of Q1 next year. For ships, the Mirai Guardian has finally arrived. This lightweight TIE interceptor is a heavy fighter that really missed the opportunity of putting its guns on the wings. I'll have some early impressions of this ship over on my gameplay channel if you'd like to see hands-on. While meant for fighting, this ship represents two unique things. First is the interior space. There are not many combat-focused ships with an interior, highlighting the focus on overnight experiences running longer-term missions, like with the Vanguard. As bedlogging loses prominence though, this will be less of a big deal. The other unique factor of this ship is that it is the first full-size ship from a new manufacturer, Mirai, so some folks may be falling in love with a new design language today. If you're new to Star Citizen, this is actually pretty significant. You should take some time to check out the different ships in this game, not in the store, mind you, just go look them up on Google. It's really cool. Eventually you'll start to be able to look at a spaceship and be able to tell which company makes it. This ship also comes in 2 unique trims, one with 2 size 5 cannons and some missiles, and the other with a quantum dampener for some E-War potential. Anyways, this is the final ship from the 2023 CitizenCon slide of ships coming out in the next year that we will be seeing, besides the Legionnaire. The economy is finally starting to take shape. I know, changing the prices of things isn't the economy, but there's more to it here. For starters, we've got new materials spawning in Pyro that sell for more in Stanton. One of these materials is even more valuable than Quantanium, so miners and cargo haulers alike may find some reasons to risk the trip into the new system. The mission payouts of all missions are also being adjusted based on the risk versus reward calculator, this being a part of the mission refactor. In less populated and more risky places, larger rewards are offered for the harder work. The same goes for easier missions with lower pay. In the future, this will even be dynamic, so even if Stanton never does become truly safer, you would get paid based on the danger levels regardless. In addition, all commodities, ship components, weapons, FPS equipment, ammo, armor, fuel, attachments, and consumables got passed for pricing, price elasticity, delivery metrics, and more, essentially giving the entire game an initial update to the baseline economy. This of course will need to change quite a bit as we go, but this is a big start for the game. And this is across the whole game, which hopefully can bring some freshness to everybody's preferred style of play. Besides miners, sorry, your gameplay is still struggling. Although, there is a phenomenon that sets Pyro apart from miners. You'll find that the distance from the star will actually help to determine material rarity and the density of materials that are popping up. This is a pretty nice touch to start differentiating mining, especially in a new system. And you should take all this keeping in mind that progress wipes in Star Citizen aren't going to happen much anymore. When it does happen, it'll likely be just a certain part of progress, like with the items, maybe the reputation, but we know that they want to wipe progress as little as possible from 4.0 on, and only intend to do so when there is absolutely no other choice.
It is our intention from this point forward to not wipe for anything or anything. That's not the same as saying that we're not going to. What we want to do from this point forward is we want to try to avoid any wipe. If we have to wipe from this point forward, it'll be something severe. It'll be something that we've all come together and said there's just no other way forward.
With server meshing and PES both in the game as the largest back-end hurdles causing resets and general instability over the last 7 years, I do think CIG will make sure this is one of the last major resets. I mean, we already generally go anywhere from 18 to 20 months between full resets in this game. Our last one was all the way back in I think April of 2023. So I could easily see them extending that to 24 months or a little bit even more, potentially meaning that after the 4.0 reset we do here, we have one additional progress wipe over the next 4 years. So this economy pass lines up with a much longer term vision for gameplay and our existing in the game, as the economy is one thing that they had to make some semblance of sense for our long-term true progression to finally start happening. So, game on. With Pyro also comes a few new factions to the game. The Headhunters are a violent gang that controls many of the ground locations in the system. You can align with them, but be sure to know what you're getting into. The Citizens for Prosperity are basically a militia that wants to make Pyro palatable enough for the UEE to take over again. Gross. You can also align with them. They too control many ground locations. These two groups actually sound like the only ones you can currently affect your hostility and protection levels with through your reputation. At least that's what it sounds like Chris is saying in his letter from the chairman. It seems this is a bit of a test case of some sort for the reputation hostility, and will hopefully expand to the other gangs soon. Because while the Rough and Ready gang controls all of the space stations, they don't really seem to be much of a danger right now. While this originally seemed like an important group due to their control over these ship services at the stations in this system, it doesn't seem like their reputation has much effect on your ability to refuel just yet. The sort of turf war structure of the Pyro system I'd hoped we'd see with these gangs and the locations involved doesn't seem to be in the game right now, or in the immediate future. For the fighting, you'll be taking on 3 different gangs who hold the zones in the 3 different stations. Xenothreat, who we know quite well as Stanton Raiders, Horizon, who we are meeting for the first time, and the Fire Rats, who like fire. Server meshing, the whole point of Star Citizen 4.0. Even as I record this, I just feel relief that after all these years it's finally in the wild. Whatever happens from here, happens. But I've never been on such a roller coaster quite like these last 5 years. I can't imagine what the folks who are actually building this tech at CIG are feeling right now. It's certainly not the Jesus tech that's gonna fix the entire game magically overnight. You'll notice in my footage, there's still plenty of issues to fix. But the signs are already showing that this was a big step in the right direction. Currently, shards of up to 700 players have run with upwards of 15 frames per second on the server. This isn't perfect, and even the performance at that time was far from it, but there's been a very notable increase in game performance in addition to an increase in player population. Things do still get a bit rough when too many people move into one server, and overall there are still some pretty glaring issues in physics, desync, and even the server frame rate, but server meshing seems to be working. And the next step, dynamic server meshing, has been well underway for months to further expand the abilities of this tech and further improve performance. To learn more about server meshing, you can check out my recent videos on the tech, or my whole playlist dedicated to the topic. I also recently had a professional systems architect on my podcast, The Launch Sequence, over on my second channel to discuss the progress they've made, how server meshing is performing, and how it compares to other models of the same tech, like in Ashes of Creation. And one last thing about server meshing, to be clear, this was not tech meant to allow other star systems. Yes, we transition between servers when using these new jump points, which are pretty cool. The real power is the server separation found throughout the system that allows for thousands of players in the same space that even still on the parallel servers running on 324.3 are struggling with just over 100 players. And I'll leave you to that so we don't spend another 5 minutes on the topic here, because there are other additions to look at. Apart from the space cows also coming in to start populating many of the planets throughout the game, quantum travel is seeing a little bit of a rebalance in anticipation of the major rework happening someday. For those who love the Carrack, it now has its storage working, and it got its armor plating over the cockpit. Nice look. With that storage working though, the Carrack really becomes an amazing long-range craft once again. We're also seeing some FOIP improvements in this update, though I do wish it was the VoIP system that was getting an overhaul. As I mentioned, the AI in the game are also getting more talkative, responsive, and all around more believable, which makes the game feel a bit more lively. Backpack storage saw a buff to help with looting, an increase of 50% volume, and a slight increase in max dimensions. Armor carrying capacity was decreased. The advanced HUD on ships was added, which can be toggled via the MFDs. This HUD is a huge win for Star Citizen, as it delivers just about every piece of information you might need when flying in more advanced methods. And players will now respawn in their hangar solely when they're at their home location. This is going to greatly decrease the startup time it takes to get from your hab to your ship if you don't decide to log off in your ship. But note, this is likely a temporary change. In terms of the big ticket items, that is 4.0. If you're looking for sneaky additions, my friend the 5-star puts out great Shadow Patch Notes series, but generally, this is what's going to affect you. And a lot of it is centered around the new star system, I know, but I'll have a whole video about how this update release has actually gone in the next few weeks. Because this was really just about what was included. Now it's time to sink our teeth into it and see how it's actually performing. But I will tell you this, nothing that could have or did come in this update is going to transform the janky tech demo that is 324 into a full game. We are still a ways away from that. You're still going to run into glitches, instability, frustrating balance decisions, and communication mishaps. There is a reason they are still running the previous version live simultaneously for the first time ever. Missions aren't working, and the environment overall still needs some work. But this update is a big step in the right direction. It's a fairly clear start of an optimization process for them and an expansion for more players to start getting into play together. It is a clear sign of focus on law, security, and a distinction of different play areas in the game. It is a push to get an economy that makes sense for players, and it is the beginning of the next phase of Star Citizen's development. I genuinely think that for anybody who has taken a step back from Star Citizen for a while, this is going to be a good time to at least check back in just to see how it's doing. So maybe wait a hot patch or two, or maybe a point patch till next quarter, just, get rid of those initial baddies. Either way, it's good that players can choose between two versions of the game if things aren't working out well on one or the other. While it might be harder on the servers, CIG is looking out for the players here, and it's appreciated at a time when they'll be mostly out of the office for the next couple of weeks, and a lot of players just don't have a lot of confidence in the game at the moment. Until I give my full opinion on the quality of this release though next month, I hope this video got you a bit more up to date on the long-awaited 4.0. If you'd like to see some gameplay, come join me on my streams on this channel. We'll be testing out all these features thoroughly over the next few weeks. If you want to join and help, you can come and jump in with my org GII. Just go over to gii.app to sign up and hop in with us this Saturday. You can also see some of this gameplay over on my gameplay channel, Space Tomato Plays. And on my podcast, releasing on my second channel every week with a different guest, we're going to be discussing this update's launch from many different perspectives over the next couple of months. So consider checking out an episode that jumps out at you over there. Thank you for sticking around for this whole video. This was a long one. I hope you learned something new in it, and I'll catch you in the next.